I asked ChatGTP and Meta AI, between Peter Obi, Bola Tinubu and Atiku Abubakar, who had the best economic policy that would have improved the living standard of Nigerians? I was amazed with the answer the both of them gave me. Okay, let me share it with you guys.
A comprehensive analysis. Economic policies of Peter Obi, Bola Tinubu, and Atiku Abubakar, which candidate had the best economic policy for improving the living standard of Nigerians? In the 2023 Nigerian presidential election, the three major candidates Peter Obi, Bola Tinubu, and Atiku Abubakar each proposed distinct economic policies that aimed to address Nigeria's numerous challenges, from poverty and unemployment to fiscal inefficiency and infrastructure deficits. Each candidate presented a vision of how Nigeria could be transformed, but their approaches varied significantly. This report examines the key components of their economic policies, assesses how they would impact the Nigerian economy, and evaluates which candidate's policy would most effectively improve the living standards of Nigerians. The Nigerian economy has faced a range of challenges, including low economic diversification, high unemployment rates, inflation, and infrastructural decay. Therefore, the priority for any policy should be to stimulate growth, reduce poverty, and increase the purchasing power of the average Nigerian. The policies presented by these three candidates were designed with these objectives in mind. However, the question remains, which of these policies stands the best chance of addressing Nigeria's economic challenges and improving the living standards of its people? Peter Obi economic policy. Peter Obi, the candidate of the Labour Party, campaigned on a platform of fiscal discipline, reducing wasteful government spending, and focusing on building a more diversified and sustainable economy. His policy proposals were rooted in the belief that Nigeria's future growth would depend on how efficiently its resources were managed and how effectively it could diversify away from an all-dependent economy. Key components of Peter Obi's economic policy. 1. Fiscal discipline and reduction of government waste. Obi emphasized the importance of reducing government expenditures, particularly the cost of governance. He proposed streamlining the bureaucracy and cutting down on unnecessary government expenditures, such as lavish government spending and unsustainable subsidies. He believed that reducing corruption and inefficiency within government would save billions of dollars, which could be redirected into more productive sectors of the economy. 2. Diversification of the economy. One of Obi's key promises was to reduce Nigeria's dependence on oil exports, which are vulnerable to global price fluctuations. His plan called for investments in agriculture, manufacturing, and technology. Obi believed that by focusing on these sectors, Nigeria could create millions of jobs and develop a more resilient economy. He also advocated for value-added industries within agriculture, such as processing and packaging, to increase Nigeria's export potential. 3. Human capital development. Obi placed a significant emphasis on investing in education and healthcare as essential pillars of sustainable economic growth. He proposed improving the quality of education and providing skill development opportunities for Nigeria's youth by investing in human capital. Obi believed Nigeria could empower its population to contribute to a modern and competitive economy. 4. Infrastructure development. While not a primary focus, Obi also proposed investing in critical infrastructure, particularly in transportation and power, to reduce inefficiencies in the economy. He suggested leveraging the private sector to boost infrastructure development. 5. Transparency and governance. Obi's policy was also rooted in the idea of good governance and transparency. He promised to eliminate corruption and promote accountability in government, which he argued would create a more favorable business environment and enhance public sector efficiency. Impact on living standards. Peter Obi's policy could improve living standards in the long term by creating a more stable, diversified, and efficient economy. If successfully implemented, reducing wasteful government spending, diversifying away from oil, and investing in education and healthcare would create jobs, increase productivity, and enhance the well-being of Nigerians. However, achieving these objectives would require significant political will and may face resistance from entrenched interests. Bola Tinubu's economic policy. Bola Tinubu, the candidate of the All Progressives Congress (APC), proposed a policy focused on continuing the economic reforms that had been implemented during the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari. Tinubu's policy was built on his experience as the former governor of Lagos State, where he implemented a range of economic reforms to attract investment and improve infrastructure. Key components of Bola Tinubu's economic policy. 1. Infrastructure development. Tinubu placed a strong emphasis on infrastructure, which he considered a key enabler of economic growth. His policy proposed significant investments in transportation, energy, and housing. Tinubu argued that improved infrastructure would stimulate economic activities, create jobs, and enhance Nigeria's competitiveness. 2. Public-private partnerships (PPP). Tinubu's approach to economic development heavily relied on partnerships between the government and the private sector. He proposed leveraging public-private partnerships (PPPs) to finance large infrastructure projects and stimulate growth in key sectors such as energy, housing, and transportation. 3. Job creation through innovation and manufacturing. Tinubu's economic policy also focused on fostering innovation and supporting manufacturing as a means of creating jobs. He proposed setting up special economic zones and promoting policies to support local production and reduce Nigeria's dependence on imports. 4. Monetary and fiscal reforms. Tinubu proposed monetary and fiscal reforms to address Nigeria's fiscal challenges. His policy included improving the tax system to ensure more efficient revenue collection, boosting domestic revenue generation, and promoting investment in key sectors like technology and agriculture. 5. Privatization and economic liberalization. Tinubu advocated for the continued liberalization of the economy, including privatization of state-owned enterprises and reducing regulatory bottlenecks that hinder private sector growth. Impact on living standards. Tinubu's policies, particularly his focus on infrastructure development and public-private partnerships, could lead to significant short-term job creation and stimulate economic growth. However, some critics argue that his focus on privatization and market-driven reforms might disproportionately benefit the wealthy and corporate interests, potentially exacerbating income inequality. In the long run, however, a robust infrastructure system and private sector growth could enhance productivity and living standards. Atiku Abubakar's economic policy. Atiku Abubakar, the candidate of the People's Democratic Party (PDP), proposed a more market-driven approach, emphasizing privatization, economic liberalization, and large-scale infrastructure development. Atiku's policy was largely focused on creating a business-friendly environment and attracting foreign direct investment (FDI). Key components of Atiku Abubakar's economic policy. 1. Privatization and liberalization. Atiku's policy included the aggressive privatization of key state-owned enterprises, particularly in sectors like oil and telecommunications. He believed that privatization would bring in much-needed investment and improve efficiency in these sectors. 2. Infrastructure development. Like Tinubu, Atiku emphasized the importance of infrastructure investment. His plan included significant investments in roads, railways, and energy. He proposed modernizing Nigeria's transportation network and providing affordable energy to boost industrialization. 3. Support for small and medium enterprises (SMEs). Atiku's policy sought to promote small and medium-sized enterprises (SMEs) as engines of growth and job creation. He proposed making financing more accessible to SMEs and improving the regulatory environment for businesses. 4. Fiscal and monetary reforms. Atiku's economic policy included reforms to remove subsidies on petroleum products and address fiscal imbalances. He also proposed a market-driven exchange rate policy, which he argued would stabilize the naira and attract foreign investment. 5. Human capital development. Atiku's policy stressed the importance of improving Nigeria's human capital. He proposed reforms in education and healthcare, as well as vocational training programs to equip Nigerians with the skills necessary to participate in a modern economy. Impact on living standards. Atiku's market-driven reforms could lead to a more liberalized and competitive economy. However, his focus on privatization and fiscal reforms such as the removal of subsidies, could cause short-term economic shocks, particularly for the poor and vulnerable. In the medium to long term, if implemented well, his policies could stimulate economic growth, create jobs, and reduce poverty. Comparative analysis. Each of the three candidates presented a policy vision that addressed Nigeria's economic challenges, but their approaches were different. Peter Obi's policy focuses on sustainable and long-term growth by reducing government waste, improving transparency, and diversifying the economy. His emphasis on human capital development could lead to lasting improvements in the quality of life for Nigerians. Bola Tinubu's policy is centered on infrastructure, development, and public-private partnerships. His focus on stimulating the private sector and improving Nigeria's infrastructure could bring short-term economic benefits, but might require careful management to avoid exacerbating inequality. Atiku Abubakar's policy promotes privatization and liberalization as a means to boost growth. While his policies could create a more competitive economy in the long run, the potential for economic shocks in the short term, for example, removal of subsidies, may negatively impact the poor. In conclusion, Peter Obi economic policy seems the most promising for long-term, sustainable improvements in living standards, especially in terms of reducing government inefficiency, diversifying the economy, and investing in human capital. However, all three candidates have proposals that could positively impact Nigeria's economy, but the challenges of implementation and potential political opposition will be significant. Ultimately, the best policy will depend on the ability of the elected candidate to navigate Nigeria's complex political and economic landscape.